Now I've got a video now which I'm going to try and illustrate how we hang a pendulum on a French clock. And this is the dummy thing. This is the clock itself, and I'm using that because it helps to illustrate what I've got to show you. The pendulum hangs from this spring here, that one there, right? And it's got two little eyes on it, which you may be able to see there and there, from which the pendulum hangs. And this is the pendulum, and you can see there's a hook on there, and that hook has to hook over that, and then it's suspended, so that then is like that. So that is what you've got to achieve. It's not easy because the clock is in the case and there are a lot of things in the way. While we're here, this is the foot, and the pendulum rod, which is this section, has to go in there because the escape drives the pendulum, and on that up there the escape is in here, and the clock drives the pendulum. This is called, this top section here is the Brocot movement, and when you turn the front of the clock there's a little keyhole, key slot there, that will turn this rod here and turn it on there, and in the center there you can see that there's a little doodah which goes up and down, and so when you turn it clockwise that goes down, shortens the spring, and that is in effect lifting the bob, and that's the bob on the bottom. But of course it doesn't lift the bob. You try and leave the bob as it is whenever you can. So what we've got to do is to hook this hook over those two sections there, and at the same time get it in the foot here. And that's what you've got to do when the clock is in the case. You've got to maneuver it around the hammer, so it goes on the inside of the hammer. You've then got to get it onto the hook there, so it's suspended properly. And it's not easy, not difficult, but it's not easy to do it. You'd be surprised sometimes. And you've got to have good light, and you must get it so that it's the pendulum is hanging in the foot. And I think you can see it there, that's hanging in the foot there. And so that when the foot moves, this, which is from the escape that drives the clock, when that moves, it makes the pendulum swing. And it's just got to touch on either side. So that is what you've got to try and achieve. And to achieve it, you use a pair of long nose pliers with serrated edges. You can see that there's a serrated edge in that, so it grips the pendulum rod, and you've got to lift it up and put it over like that, with the rod in the foot. And if you've got a bell, the bell's got to come off, and if you've got a gong, you've got to get the rod inside the gong and out of the way of the hammer. I'll illustrate that in a minute on a live clock, as it were. I mean in a clock case, to try and show you how it works. Okay, so that's what we've got to try and achieve. The pendulum hanging from the Brocot suspension spring here, and then in the foot and free of the gong and the hammer. And you've got to be careful when you fit it that sometimes the clock is a little bit tight in between the gong which is a coil of wire, a coil of steel, and the gong, if you're not careful, the pendulum bob will brush against the gong and you might hear it, or you may not even notice it, but that'll stop the clock. And the clock, of course, the pendulum has to be vertical. You can see it's not working at the moment because it's not vertical, in line with the center of gravity, so that the pendulum swings equally both sides. Right, that's the first one. I'll do another one. Now here we have a nice old clock. It's probably about 1870 or something like that. This has got a bell. We've got to hang the pendulum, so we've got to remove the bell to be able to get the pendulum to hang. Now you've got to be awfully careful, because although this clock hasn't got a bottom, most of them do, and if you drop this nut here that I'm undoing now to take the bell off, you've got a problem, because it'll drop down inside the clock and it's very difficult to get it out. The best thing to do is to use a pointer, something like this, which you can get down inside, and wiggle the clock around until you can see it, and put some blue tack on the end and pick it up with that. Now I've got the bell off, so there's the bell off, and you can see inside there is the movement. Now I can see the spring. There's the spring with, let's see, there's the spring with the two little hooks on either side, or pins on either side. Yeah, on the broquette movement, you can see there's the broquette movement. And when you turn it from the front in a clockwise, then that little thing at the top there, that one, comes down. And it comes down and shortens this spring, which in effect lifts the bob. Now you can relatively easily put the spring in, put the pendulum in. I'll see if I can get that. I don't want to hit the slip. I've tilted it forward, but it's not a bad idea to do that on occasions, but the trouble is that when you tilt it forward, you've got to be careful when you've got the spring in. And I'm only doing this to illustrate it. I put a cushion behind so that it's going to do that. Now I've got the pendulum there, the hook's towards the clock. I tilt this, and generally speaking you've got to do it so that you are peering up inside it, and I've got it in the foot and onto the hook, and didn't do it. There, I've managed to do that with my pliers. I've hooked it on, right, it's hooked on. I've tilted this forward. You've got to be careful, because you don't want to damage the spring by tilting it too far forward. And now I've got to replace the bell, and this can be tricky. If you've got a bottom on this, it makes it very difficult, and I'll try and get this in there. And then this little nut goes on top now, and you've got to be careful you don't drop it. Got it. Now I've got that. If you have to adjust the bell hammer so that it strikes the bell, always use two pairs of pliers, one right up at the top so that you don't strain the wire support in the jointing, where it goes into the boss there, and then you should be able to get it right. Tricky. And the other thing, you can sometimes adjust the ring of the bell by twisting the bell like that, because it's slightly concentric, so it might make just that a millimetre or half millimetre difference, so that the bell will ring as opposed to the hammer resting on it. So there we are. I've put in that pendulum. Now I've got to take it out, and I'll do that because I haven't repaired this clock. As you can see, it's pretty mucky, and the whole thing needs to be tidied up. That's what I'll do next. Now I'll get one with a gong in. Oh yes, just to add on a point, this clock hasn't got a base. Most clocks have. And so as a consequence, if it has got a base, that's the procedure you've got to follow. If it hasn't got a base, then you can approach it from underneath, like that, holding the boss at the bottom, the bob, and manoeuvre it round, but you've got to make sure, which you can't see, you get it into the foot. Maybe it's better to take the bell off, because you can easily get at it, but you can probably get it that way. So most clocks have got a base as well, because that helps to make it secure. Now here we have another really nice old clock, a bit of a grubby state, but it's in just the sort of condition I like, because all the embellishments have gone. They all need gilding. This all needs cleaning up. But it's quite a nice old clock. Little bit of damage up here. You see there. I'll fill that and do it all right. So we want to get to the back of it, and assuming it's all been sorted out, I put a cushion here, so it's got something to rest against and doesn't damage the glass. There. Now you can see this one has got a gong. Let's see if I can get it. So there's it. It's got a gong and what they call a count wheel, which is slightly old-fashioned. It's not so good as the other way, where they've got a rack and hammer on the front. So that's the count wheel for the strike, and there's the hammer. Now you can see there's the foot, and you've still got the broquette pins on either side. This is the gong, and now I've got to manoeuvre the pendulum, which is here, so that it will hook over the broquette suspension spring. And I'm going to take that high there. I haven't done this, I don't know how it's going to work. I've got to try and manoeuvre it through. So I've tilted it forward so I can see what I'm doing. I'm trying to get that so that and I've gripped it hard with the pliers, with the serrated edge. Now I've got to put it down inside the gong, and then inside the hammer, like so. I've got it inside the hammer now, so you can see that the gong is clear. There's the rod down there. There's the hammer wire. This is the foot that I've got to get the pendulum rod, suspension rod in. Now I've got another pair of pliers here which I'm going to use so that I don't drop this lot as I readjust my grip. Not easy. I've got it in the foot now, so if I can get this up here and grip that, now I've got to do it probably from the bottom. Twist that round so that the hook is now facing the clock, back of the clock. Still now I think I can do it. Yeah, I've got it on now, I think. Yep. So that hook is facing the clock, the back of the clock. It's the rod here is clear of the gong and in the foot there, and it's clear of the hammer. So that, now I can check it and I can see that it's swinging nicely, yes, clear of the gong. If it wasn't clear of the gong, then there's a bit of a problem, and you might have to tip it forward a little with a shim underneath. But that happens occasionally if the whole system is not original. And bear in mind that most of these clocks are 100, 150 years old, might almost be 200 years old, and quite frequently they aren't original. They've had a new part put into it, a new movement put in, and no, it's just the way it is. It's similar to having a car that was run-of-the-mill and it needs a new engine, so you get a new engine, and you still got the same car but a new engine, and that's what happens in these cases. But you can see that's nice now, and it's swinging. But do be careful. You don't want to move the clock within this frame, because when the clock is level, all the clocks that I do are leveled out on a level surface so that this is right. And if you move this by twisting that or twisting that, then the whole movement twists, and as a consequence it's not in beat. It won't work properly. You can see that the clock over here, which is working quite well, if I can get it. There we are. You see that clock there is on a stand, and it's in beat because I've adjusted it in the stand so that it's on an equal left and right for the gravity of the pendulum. So there's no pendulum, it's working on the movement. The movement is working, the movement is forcing this to go backwards and forwards. When the pendulum is in there, that will swing and that activates the pendulum and keeps it going. And that's in perfect beat now because it's on equal sides. And so, but if I move it round, it'll stop. Now, you'll see if I move that, stopped. And it was only a millimetre. Move it back, and it's working. So you don't want to move the movement within the case if you can possibly help it. Okay, that's it.